Hey, you guys. It is your girl, Angela Smith of the Anjanelle Online Sewing University, where we help you to master the basics, build your skill set and confidence, and create some of the hottest trends. And we do it all virtually. All right, so today I'm going to show you like this upscale cocktail dress. It's an ideal that I had after seeing some inspiration online. And of course, I'm going to add my own spin to it. Right here, I have stretch satin. I have this sequins with fringe on it, which I can't wait to dive into. I'm going to do a really dramatic sleeve with that and just a simple dress with that. Then I have my patterns out. It's going to be a simple fitted dress. So I'm going to use this pattern. You guys may remember when I went over that. I want to make sure the bottom of my dress fits like my pencil skirt because it was the perfect fit. So I have this pattern here also just to double check that. Then you know what this is. It is a sleeve. I also wanted to point out preparation, you guys, before you just hop on the sewing machine and you go in like what I'm so anxious to do. Make sure you get properly prepped. I have all of my thread, which I am going to swap out the threads in my sewing machine. I'm going to make sure everything is ready. I'm going to make sure my serger is ready. Then I'm going to lay my patterns. I'm going to cut and I'm going to go through the whole rundown. All right, so the first thing that I did was I laid out my dress pattern. Okay, and you can see my chalk marks where I'm making some slight alterations to it. Let me explain to you what I'm doing here. Now, this fitted dress is for stretch fabric, okay? It doesn't have any type of zippers, any type of closures. You can literally just pull it over your head and it's going to contour to your body, okay? I remembered that when I created this pattern. Now, as far as the length, I added an additional 1 inch at the bottom just to make it a little bit longer because keep in mind, I'm going to have to do a hem at the bottom. Now, I'm using stretch fabric for this particular dress. With using stretch fabric, keep in mind, you want to make sure the stretch is going from left to right, okay? Horizontally, not vertically, okay? Remember what I taught you previously? When it stretches from left to right, it widens it for you to be able to get your body into it. Stretching vertical, what are you trying to make yourself taller? You know, so think about it that way. All right. What I did in here, I've actually lost weight since making this pattern. However, with satin, okay, this is stretch satin. With satin, I know that even though it has a little bit of stretch to it, it's not the same stretch as like a knit. So having that in mind, what I also did was I added 1 inch. I just used my ruler, made little marks, and then actually connected all of my marks. I added 1 inch to give myself extra allowance. Now, if I end up having to take this off, it's perfectly fine. Keep in mind, you would much rather your garment be too big because you can make it smaller, opposed to being too small because it's very hard to make it bigger. Okay, so keep that in mind. Another thing I wanted to point out was up here, my armhole. Even though I'm adding allowance in here, I didn't add any allowance to my armhole. So this little mark right here, I'm going to disregard. And I started my alterations a little bit below my actual armhole. I know for a fact the armhole will fit regardless of the stretch, okay? My arm, for the most part, didn't change. If anything, it may have got a little smaller, but definitely I don't want to add an inch to my armhole. That's going to make my arm way too big. Another thing I didn't touch was the neckline. I kept it the same. And my shoulder, I kept it the same, all right? So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to cut out this pattern based on the new chalk lines, not based on the original pattern. For a fitted dress, keep in mind the front and back patterns are the same. You know, your bottom and hips and everything is what's going to stretch it out and contour to your size. So I'm basically taking, I already cut the first layer, then I put it back on fold to go ahead and do my back. So I'm about to cut a second piece the exact same way. Literally, I'm just tracing it. All right, so I have my front and my back patterns cut out. The next thing we are going to do is we are going to create what's called a facing, okay? That's going to be how we close up the top. Now, the bottom of the dress, we are going to hem it. You can also hem the neckline. However, because I already cut this and I cut it the exact form of the pattern itself, we want to do something different, because if we hem it now, we're going to cut into the neckline, making it shorter than what we intended with this particular pattern. So we're going to do what's called a facing. I love doing facing. It gives your garment a very clean and professional look. Now, if you did want to hem the neckline, there's nothing wrong with that. That's also very clean. Typically, it depends on the look that you're going for, the type of materials that you're using, as well as kind of what the occasion is. And for that reason, I'm doing a facing instead of just hemming, okay? So the very first thing you want to do is I took the scrap, just a piece of the scrap fabric, and I folded it, okay? Keep in mind the pattern is on fold. So you're going to align the fold with the fold. I have me a piece of fabric chalk. I am literally, all I did was I traced the curve of the neckline. Not only do you want to trace the curve of the neckline, but you want to go an inch into your shoulder, okay? So I went an inch in. I'll show you what that looks like on the ruler. You just want to go an inch in and then stop. Then you're going to move this out of the way, and you're going to keep that 1 inch going all the way around. Make your little marks at 1 inch, and you see how that looks? You have, just in case you guys can't see that good, that is what your facing is going to look like. When you open it up, it's going to be a C or a U, depending on how you're looking at it. And you're going to do this 2 times. One to finish up the front of the neckline, and the second piece is to finish up the back of the neckline. All right, so you know this step already. All I did was I pinned the side seams and the shoulders. You know not to pin the armhole, the neck, and the bottom of your dress. I used extra pins, as you can see. And then when I get on the sewing machine, I'm going to do a pretty tight stitch. Like, I usually use the stitch next to the loose stitch. So like, for example, my loosest stitch is number 10. I usually use number 9 because it's tighter, but this time I'm going to use around number 8. Usually with stretch fabrics, I use a zigzag stitch. Y'all know this, but with satin and stretch, it's a little bit different. So I'm going to start out by using a tighter straight stitch, and then if I'm not really seeing what I want, then I'll go back and do a zigzag stitch as well. You want to have that extra safety with satin because it is pretty fragile. Sometimes it can bulk, and you know, you just want to be really careful. It's also really slippery, which is why I use the extra pins. So my front and back pieces are now fully together, and then I did a quick try on because I knew there was a possibility that I may have to make alterations to just the bodice itself before I added the sleeves and everything else. The armhole, the neck, the shoulders, those all fit fine. I had 2 issues when I tried this on. Keep in mind, I told you that satin was going to be way tighter. It was an awesome suggestion to add the 1 inch around the actual pattern. Another thing, if you notice down here at the bottom where I caved in, this made it really, really tight and uncomfortable. What I ended up doing was cutting that off. and I kept it more wide at the bottom because keep in mind, there's no zipper, there's no closure. You want to make sure this can pull over your head and fit comfortably, which a lot of people don't do with satin, okay? But this is it has a little bit of stretch to it, so I am testing the waters. Another thing is it didn't cave in at my waist. So I instantly turned it back inside out and I started making the alterations. Like I said, the armhole fits fine. This part fit fine. The hips on down fit fine. It was literally just the waist. So I was here just taking some chalk and kind of correcting my curve. If you have a problem with that, go back to your pattern. What I did was I went back to my pattern because I know, again, just from previous experience, when I made this pattern and I designed this dress, it fit me perfectly. The curves and everything were perfect. So it was a very simple fix. I realigned my pattern. You see how that armhole now fits perfectly in there. Okay. And then what I did was, you see that? That curve in there is where I had to alter. So I just took my chalk and I just worked on the curve. Another thing, if you put on the dress inside out, make sure you don't have on any makeup or anything like that. If you put on the dress inside out, you can kind of pinch the areas that need tighten, and you can grab your measuring tape, you can grab your ruler, you can make marks, you can put pins in, and then just slip it back over your head, okay? This one is really fitted. So what I did was I just kind of made a mental note. I took some measurements, I took it off, then I made my markings, and I'm about to sew the alterations, okay? Next thing that I am going to do, I'm probably going to go ahead and complete the facing on the top. And I'm going to go ahead and serge the entire dress and hem the bottom. That way, the very last thing that I'm doing is adding my sleeves. They're going to be pretty detailed. I don't know how complex they're going to be because of the type of pattern that the fabric that I picked. But let's see how it goes. Okay, so actually before I sew on the facing, I wanted to show this portion of it, okay? If you look at the back of my dress, I did a little thing. I added some darts in here. So you can now kind of see the curve with it laying down. You can see the curve and you can see how it widens out for my hips and for my bottom. And there's still this fullness in here, even though it's pulled in at the waist. You get this look by adding darts, and they're very, very simple. I've shown how to add darts when we were pattern making, but I am going to show you, this is what they look like on the inside. I'm going to show you with my front, okay? They're very simple to do. So you're going to lay your fabric out. Lay it out flat, and mine is bulking just a little bit because of the darts. So let's just say this was flat, okay? So we're going to lay that out flat. First thing you want to do is you want to find the center of your garment, okay? I usually add my darts in the back, especially for a look like this. I add my darts in the back instead of in the front, okay? So first thing you want to do is you want to find your center. If you want to find your center, of course, you just add, you put your shoulders together, fold it, and you make a mark. Luckily for me, I had a little fold in here, a little crease that I didn't iron out, going directly through the center of my fabric. You may have something very similar, especially if you if you did your patterns exactly like I did and you did it on fold. A lot of times when you do your patterns on fold and you're, maneuvering them around, you're going to have a little crease in here. Or it could have just happened by how the fabric was on the bolt at the fabric store, okay? So what you want to do when you find your center, you're going to make a mark. Next thing is your darts typically go already where you see your curve in your garment. Let's just look at this 1/2. They typically go where you see the curve in your garment, okay? What you want to do is you're going to grab that measurement. So the measurement that I'm seeing from where I sewed to the center is exactly 7 inches, okay? Then what you want to do is you want to take half of the 7 inches. So you're going to make a mark at 3.5 inches, just a little mark. Typically what I do, I play around with my darts, like the length of them. I usually try not to go too deep into the hips or the bottom, because all that's going to do is make it tighter. This is satin. It can easily rip. But at the waistline, you can maneuver, and then kind of going up the back, you can maneuver as well. So I typically make the mark. I'm mindful of this curve, okay? Kind of go towards the bottom of that curve if that helps you. So I'm going to move my ruler. And I usually start out with about 5 inches long. So I'm going to take my chalk. I'm going to do 5 inches long. Next thing I'm going to do is, and you want to play around with this, it's all on your body shape. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the center. I'm going to go 1 inch over, make a mark. 1 inch on the other side, make a mark. So you literally have a long line, 1 inch out over here, 1 inch out over here. Now all you're going to do is create a diamond shape. A diamond shape. So this is what that is going to look like. You're making your marks just to make sure it's exactly even. Okay, guys? It's exactly even. You're going to take these exact same measurements and you're going to do it on the other half of your garment. So you see that diamond right there in the garment? Let me make sure you guys can see that. There we go. So we have a diamond. All you're going to do from here, guys, is you're going to grab your fabric at the center of that diamond, keeping in mind the points at the top and at the bottom. Okay? Keep in mind those points, and then you're going to sew it. Start down here, back stitch, go up to the point, turn your needle, go up, back stitch. And you can make this as long as you want. Play around with it depending on your shape. This is how mine ended up turning out. I did really long going all the way up my back. The reason why I did this, you guys, is because I have a really deep curve in my lower back. So sometimes when I'm wearing fitted garments, it bulks a little bit when I want it to lay smoothly. To avoid that, you do darts. And then you're going to just iron them down flat like that. My total dart, I did a long one, y'all. I went with a whole 12 inches. So my center point is 6 inches. I went up this way. I went down this way in that same diamond that I was just showing you guys. So I hope that makes sense. This is completely optional. You don't have to add darts. But again, this is how you solve the problem of like bulking, especially at the lower back. All right, so now let's get into the facing, okay? As I stated, it can look like a C, it can look like a U, depending on how you're looking at it. First thing you're going to do is right sides together. You see my shiny sides together. Put those together. You're going to pin and sew both ends of this, okay? To the point of having, you know, nice little circle. Then what you're going to do, let's bring this garment back over here. We're going to go to the front of it. Let me pull it right side out so that y'all can see it. Okay, here we go. So if you look at the neckline, got your neck, you got your shoulders, right? Your facing is just going to literally fall in line, okay? Match up the seam from the facing with the shoulder right sides together. You're going to pin that around. Both of your seams should line up perfectly with your shoulders. Then you're going to take the other part, pin it around the back. So literally, it should lay perfectly. When you pin that on, it's going to look like this. Then you're going to fold it in, okay, or fold it out first. Iron it really, really good. Then fold it in, and you're going to do a top stitch around the neck. And that's all. It's going to be complete. Now, before you do that, I should have said this first. Before you do that, let's go ahead and start serging. You're going to serge this off. If you don't have a serger, use a zigzag stitch. Do it on the inside of your entire dress as well. Side seams. Some people actually serge their darts. Like you see, I had to correct mine, which is why you see multiple stitches. But you want to go all the way around. You want to do your shoulders, serge it, or use your zigzag stitch directly on the edge to seal your dress together, okay? If you were ever to rip a seam or something like that, it won't create a hole if you have it serged or if you have a zigzag stitch to back up your initial stitch, okay? So after you serge, then you want to apply your facing. Go ahead and hem the bottom. Actually, what I'm thinking about doing is I'm going to hem the bottom of my dress last. I want to go ahead and put the sleeve in just in case I want to cut my dress a little shorter, or just in case I want to open up the side seam and do a split. So it's completely up to you. If you know you're happy with the length, even before you put your sleeve in, go ahead and hem it up. Okay, so y'all, I told y'all I was going really, really dramatic for the sleeves. And this is what I meant. This sequins detailed fabric. Now, I know what you're thinking. And it's not as overwhelming as it looks, okay? You just have to be really patient with it. One of the things that I wanted to point out, I have my sleeve pattern right here. You know how typically you cut your pattern on fold? With this type of material, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to open my sleeve all the way up because I want to be mindful of all of these sequins, okay? I have little sequins here. I have details. I have stones in here. The hardest part is really going to be cutting it. You want to make sure, like for example, in this design, my sequins are supposed to lay flat. I'm just going to take my hand. I'm going to go through. I'm going to make sure all of my sequins are laying in the right direction, okay? So that's the first step. You may not do something as dramatic, but I just wanted to show you all how to do it in case you wanted to. What I'm going to do also, when I attach my sleeve, you see this material isn't black, y'all. It's a mesh in here as well. I'm going to lay my sleeve down, and I'm not going to cut it on the sequins part. I'm also not going to cut it on the mesh. More than anything, I'm going to just go right up here to this detailed part, and that's where I'm going to put my sleeve. I'm going to pin it, and I'm just going to take my hand, and I'm going to start running my sequins underneath the actual pattern, okay? I promise you it's not as hard. I'm going to just literally pin it. I'm going to cut around it just as I typically would if it was just a regular fabric, okay? I'm going to pin it. I'm going to sew it as I typically would. So once I get it cut out, you guys already know this, right sides together, you're literally only going to sew down this one side. Then what I'm going to do, this curve of this is a little bit big because I knew that I would want to gather this material up a little bit, okay? I didn't want it to be a fitted sleeve, plus it has no stretch to it, okay? Opposed to my dress where it actually has stretch. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put just a small seam in my fabric so that I can gather it, and I'm just going to literally sew it into the dress just as I typically would, okay? I'll see if I can catch that footage for you guys as close as I can to my machine. Let's go. Okay, so I knew this would be kind of hard to show because, again, this is part mesh. But as you can see, I'm literally just sewing my sleeve regular. Now, my machine is a little bit loud. I'm going to put that out there on the front end. Y'all know I've told y'all my machine is 10 years old. But just watch. It literally sews just like regular fabric. I didn't put any pins in here. I mean, if you're going to do it, if you're new to sewing with sequins, I would recommend you do. But for me, I just want to kind of go with the flow and then move my sequins with my hand as I go. Okay, so that's why I didn't pin. Other than that, I would have pinned it. But see, it literally is so smooth. So I just wanted to point that out. I'm going to gather it just as I typically would as well. Then I'm going to pin it into my armhole and I'm going to sew it in. There we go. All right, so as you guys can see, this dress is just turning out so beautifully. For those who need a refresher on how to put in a sleeve, because I literally just put it in like I would a basic sleeve, what I'm going to do is I'm going to include a bonus course. I'm going to attach that to this one, just going over again how to put in a sleeve. It was really complex. It was really hard to record on my sewing machine only because this material is so detailed. You wouldn't have been able to really follow along. Outside of that, I hemmed it as normal. Look how clean that is. Don't forget, the best way to get the cleanest and straightest hem is using an iron. Okay, put it on a low setting if you're using satin like me. The facing on the top neck, it turned out so good. What I'm going to do, I've been debating for a minute with this sleeve. It's the type of sleeve that I put in. It has a small flare as you go down, but I really wanted it to be cuff. I wanted a cuff on it, so I want it to be kind of baggy with a cuff. So what I'm doing is I have two pieces cut for my cuff that I'm going to work on. The thing is, these sequins hanging is going to cover the cuff, but I'm still going to attempt it, okay, and just see how it looks. So what I did was I already cut it even. I know it's kind of hard to tell, and I put a gathering stitch in here, so you can kind of already tell where it's kind of coming in at the cuff, okay, from me gathering it. So I'm about to do that. You guys, a cuff is very simple as well. I'm going to take my wrist measurement, and because this fabric has stretch, don't forget, you have to make sure the stretch is going from left to right, okay, horizontally, not vertically, in order for you to just pull your hand straight through, okay? So what you want to do is take your wrist measurement. I'm only going to add about a 1/2 inch because I do want it to be pretty tight on my wrist. And then I'll show you what to do next, but it's very simple. All right, so this is the final stretch. This may be the most difficult part of the entire garment, but it's the very last step, okay? So as I stated, I wanted a cuff. I knew that I wanted about a 2-inch cuff. So what I did was I cut 5 inches plus my wrist measurement, okay? Keep in mind, I added a 1/2 inch to my wrist measurement. First thing I did was right sides together. I stitched it as well as I serged it. Now all we're going to do is we are going to turn our cuff in, okay? See, there's my 2 inches coming for me. Because there's only one seam, the easy way to do this is just put your seams together. I recommend using a little pin or something to hold it so it doesn't move. And then you want to make sure you just put your fingers in there and pull that cuff all the way out, okay? I mean, look at that. That goes directly on my wrist. You see how I kind of tugged to get it in there? I had to stretch it. That's how tight I wanted it on my arm. And I'm trying to dodge that pin right there. Okay, so that's my cuff. Now what you're going to do, as I told you before, I already have my sleeve gathered. And I know that I've actually gone over sleeves and I've shown this, but I'm just going to give you another refresher. So this is more like a intermediate to advanced course, okay? What you're going to do, hopefully you can see that hole is ruffled up because it's gathered. And I gathered it really tight because for the next move, this is what you're going to do. With the raw edges on top, put your hands in there, grab all of your gathers, and you're going to pull that small portion of the sleeve through, okay? Next, what you're going to do, and this is why I said it may be the most difficult, is you're going to try to, you're not going to completely smooth it out because it's gathered, but you are going to, just make sure it's consistent. So I'm going in there and I'm also tucking my sequins back in there. They're trying to escape. And once you get a good consistency, main thing is you want to make sure all of it is stitched together, okay? There's no holes. You're going to kind of go towards the edge, line those up. So I'm lining up, where it's gathered, my actual sleeve and my cuff. And I'm going to start putting pins in there. You have to be really good at filling down in there because it's a lot of fabric that's gathered. That's what gathering is being able to control fullness. So we're just going to go around. You don't need a lot of pins, not really close together, because keep in mind, you got to put this on a sewing machine and sew it. So I'm even kind of reaching all the way in there, making sure none of my sleeve is kind of slipping down. So you're just going around. And I see that, you see that some of my netting is sticking out of there. That's perfectly fine. Perfectly fine. This one was, I allowed a little bit of extra allowance on the actual sleeve because of the sequins. It was throwing it off. This should be a piece of cake if you're using just a regular, solid color fabric or, stretch knit or something like that. So literally, I got the entire thing pinned. So I'm just going to go in there. I'm just looking, making sure piece by piece, all of that sleeve is up and against my cuff. Okay. If I see any areas that's too bulky, I'm just going to take my pin out, slide it over a little bit and repin it. Okay. That's literally it. Okay. And then you're going to do a stitch all the way around. After it's stitched all the way around, you're going to serge it all the way around. I actually finished my other sleeve. So let me show you what it looks like. Isn't that gorgeous? And I intentionally allowed my sequins to fall over my cuff. I'm really big on detail. But I'm going to move that back so you can see how well that cuff looks. Look